I'm Charlie Saunier from the Renegades of Puck, and this is the 20th Century Hockey Chronicle. The NHL takes stewardship of the New York Americans franchise, which is in deep financial trouble to begin the 1936-1937 season. The NHL also introduces the Calder Trophy, which will honor the league's Rookie of the Year. It is named after NHL President Frank Calder. An era ends in Toronto as the great Joe Primo, age 30, retires after 8 NHL seasons. The Rangers enter the season without Bun Cook, thus ending the long reign of the Bill Cook, Frank Boucher, Bun Cook line. The Rangers ice a new brother act as Neil and Mac Colville make their debut. The Red Wings repeat as American Division champs, going 25-14-9. The powerful Wings club leads the NHL in goals scored with 128 and fewest allowed with 102. The sophomore jinx strikes Chicago goalie Mike Kourakis. The 1935-36 Rookie of the Year leads the league in losses with 27. The Blackhawks, 3 years removed from a Stanley Cup finish, out of the playoffs. The Maple Leafs replace legendary George Hainsworth with 21-year-old rookie Turk Broda, who will go on to enjoy years of playoff glory. Cecil Hart takes over as coach of the Habs, replacing Sil Mantha. He leads the club to first place in the Canadian Division with a record of 24-18-6. At age 34, Nell Stewart scores 20 goals in 30 games for the Americans. He finishes with 23 tallies and a share of the league goal-scoring lead. Detroit sniper Larry Ari shares the NHL lead in goals with 23, despite a season-ending broken ankle. The Americans' Sweeney Schreiner wins his second straight scoring championship with 46 points, despite finishing fourth in goals with 21 and third overall in assists. Toronto rookie Sil Apps, Joe Primo's replacement, leads the NHL in assists with 29, and comes within 1 point of the scoring title with 45. Butch Keeling, the Rangers' 11-year veteran, has his best ever year with 22 goals. Red Wings center Marty Berry is second in assists with 27 and third in points with 44. Bob Gracie leads the Maroons in scoring with 36 points. Detroit's Norm Smith extends his mastery of the league, winning the goals against title with 2.13. Norm Smith ties Boston's Tiny Thompson for the league lead in shutouts with 6. Rangers goalie Dave Kerr has the second stingiest goals against average with 2.19. Red Horner slams his way to a fifth penalty crown, 124 penalty minutes on the season. On January 28th of 1937, Howie Morenz is checked from behind by Chicago's Earl Siebert. Morenz's skate gets stuck and his leg is badly broken. Slow to heal and distressed over his deteriorating condition, Morenz dies suddenly of heart failure on March 8, 1937, at the age of 34. The funeral services for Howie Morenz draw a packed house at the Montreal Forum. Thousands more would linger outside. The playoffs undergo a change in format as teams play best-of-3 series instead of total goal series in the first round. The Maroons and Bruins, second-place division finishers, battle to a third game, which is won by Montreal 4-1. In the battle of third-place finishers, the Rangers sweep the Maple Leafs in 2 straight games. In the semifinals, the Rangers oust the Maroons with a pair of shutouts, 1-0 and 4-0. New York goalie Dave Kerr stars in goal. Detroit and the Canadiens, the division champs, battle in the best-of-5 format. The Red Wings win the first 2 games. The emotionally wrought Habs tie their semifinal series with a pair of high-pressure wins. In the 5th game between Detroit and Montreal, tied 1-1 after regulation, it goes to triple overtime before Detroit's Hek Kilray beats Wilf Kude to send the Red Wings to the finals. Red Wings goalie Norm Smith is injured in Game 1 of the finals against the Rangers. Detroit sends untested Earl Robertson into goal. He loses 5-1. With Earl Robinson still in goal, Detroit wins Game 2 of the Cup Finals 4-2. Detroit and New York trade 1-0 wins in Games 3 and 4 as goalies Dave Kerr, 4 playoff shutouts, and Earl Robertson steal the show. In Game 5, Earl Robertson blanks the Rangers 3-0, giving the Red Wings their second consecutive Stanley Cup. Toronto's Sil Apps wins the Calder Trophy as Rookie of the Year. The Canadiens' Babe Siebert, 28 points overall, wins the Hart Trophy. The Lady Byng Trophy goes to Detroit's Marty Berry, while teammate Norm Smith wins the Vezina. Hockey had a distinctly different look and sound in the 1930s. Fans were protected by a wire mesh fence that screamed and rattled with the sound of wayward shot or a grimacing defenseman running an opposing forward into the metal diamonds. The ice was a misty gray, unmarked except for 2 blue lines and a goal line. There was no center red marker to define the neutral zone, and the goal crease was as big as the man in the peaked cap could dare to keep clear. A new piece of silverware appeared on the NHL awards table in the 1936-37 season. Although the league had been recognizing its outstanding rookie since the 1932-33 season, it wasn't until the 1936-37 campaign the NHL president Frank Calder donated a trophy in his name to be awarded to the league's best newcomer. Following his breakthrough season in 1935-36, Norm Smith continued his masterful play for the Red Wings in 36-37, capturing the Vezina Trophy after leading the league with 6 shutouts and a 2.13 goals against average. However, in the 1937 playoffs, he suffered a severe elbow injury in the game against the Canadiens and was forced to sit out most of the best-of-5 final series against the New York Rangers. As the trigger man on one of the NHL's most acclaimed forward units, Larry Ari was right on the target during the 1936-37 season. Teamed with centerman Marty Berry and left winger Herbie Lewis, Ari tied for the NHL lead in goals with 23. It was the first time in his career that he had reached the 20-goal plateau, and his excellent production propelled the Red Wings to their second straight Stanley Cup title. Marty Berry was the offensive catalyst for the Red Wings during the 1937 playoffs. Berry led all postseason scorers in goals with 4, assists with 7, and points with 11 as the Red Wings defended their Stanley Cup crown. In the 5th and deciding game of the 1937 finals against the Rangers, Berry scored the Cup winner in the first period and later added an insurance marker as Detroit prevailed 3-0. In his 3rd season with the New York Rangers, Davey Kerr led Broadway Blues to the 1937 Stanley Cup Finals with one of the most outstanding displays of goaltending in the history of the franchise. Although the Rangers had a losing record during the season, Kerr registered 4 shutouts in 9 playoff games. He led all postseason goalies with 6 wins, 4 shutouts, and a goals against average of 1.11. One of the NHL's most respected on-ice leaders, Albert Charles "Babe" Siebert, joined the faltering Canadiens in 1936 and led the team from the NHL basement to the top of the Canadian division in just 1 season. An 11-year veteran and expert tactician, Siebert helped the Canadiens overcome the death of Howie Morenz and remain focused on their drive to first place. Siebert was justly awarded the Hart Trophy as the NHL's MVP. In an emergency situation, the Red Wings turned to Earl Robertson in 1937. After Detroit goaltender Norm Smith was injured in Game 1 of the finals against the Rangers, the Wings replaced him with Robertson, who had no NHL experience. Nevertheless, Robertson won Game 2, lost Game 3 1-0 and pitched a shutout in Game 4, and won Game 5 3-0 to clinch the Cup for Detroit. Though he never played for the Wings again, Robertson toiled several years with the Americans. One of the most incredible Stanley Cup playoff upsets of all time came from an Americanized Chicago Blackhawks squad in 1937-38. The Blackhawks, who were never thought to be serious contenders for the Stanley Cup, in fact, some thought their chances were 100-1 against. The Hawks finished the regular season with a dismal 14-25-9 record, which placed them 3rd in the American division. They lost their first game of the playoffs 6-4 to the Canadiens, but then stunned Le Havre with a 4-0 victory. Game 3 was tied 2-2 in overtime when Blackhawk Lou Trudel fired the key shot. The puck glanced off teammate Paul Thompson and into Montreal's net, sending the Blackhawks to the semifinals against the New York Americans. The favored Americans shut the Hawks down in the opening game, beating them 3-1 at Madison Square Garden. A loss in Game 2 would have eliminated the Blackhawks, but they managed to pull out in double overtime 1-0 thanks to a goal from rookie Cully Dahlstrom. In the decisive Game 3, the Hawks prevailed in another thriller 3-2 as Chicago's Doc Romness knocked in the winner. Despite a losing record, the Blackhawks were off to meet the Maple Leafs in the Stanley Cup Finals. Toronto was a clear-cut favorite over Chicago, especially since Blackhawks star goaltender Mike Kourakis had suffered a broken toe in the final game of the semis and could not dress for the finals. Chicago coach Bill Stewart requested permission to use Rangers goalie Dave Kerr, but Toronto owner Conn Smythe rejected the idea. The Hawks, now desperate for a goaltender, literally pulled some guy off the street. They found Alfie Moore, who had some experience with the New York Americans, in a Toronto tavern on the afternoon of Game 1 and signed him to a contract. Amazingly, Moore rejected virtually everything the Leafs shot at him as Chicago defeated Toronto 3-1 at Maple Leaf Gardens. For Game 2, Chicago decided to test yet another minor leaguer, but Paul Goodman was a bad choice. Toronto won the game 5-1 as Gordie Drillin and George Parsons each scored twice for the Leafs. It became clear that if the Hawks were to knock off Toronto, they needed the services of star goalie Caracas. At last, the Chicago trainer outfitted Caracas with a special shoe to protect his toe. He suited up for Game 3, and the Hawks went on to win 2-1 with Doc Ramos and Carl Voss providing the Chicago goals. The Hawks needed one more big win from Caracas, and he provided it in Game 4. The Hawks prevailed 4-1 and skated off with the Stanley Cup. Few could believe that Chicago had won the series. In fact, NHL President Frank Calder, expecting the Maple Leafs to take the cup, had already shipped the mug to Toronto. The series was also notable for another reason. Many of the Stanley Cup winners, plus Coach Stewart, were born in the United States. Blackhawks owner Frederick McLaughlin, himself an American, couldn't have been more proud. The NHL adopts a rule calling for a face-off to ensue when the puck is shot from the defensive side of center past the offensive goal line, better known as icing. Penalty shots will be awarded if anyone but the goalie falls on the puck within 10 feet of the goal. The league stages its second All-Star game on November 2, 1937. It's a fundraiser for the family of Howie Morenz, who died the previous March. The Maroons prepare for their final NHL season. First-year coach King Clancy is behind the bench. The Chicago Blackhawks hire their 13th coach in 12 years, Bill Stewart. The Bruins assemble the famed Kraut line with Milt Schmidt, Bobby Bauer, and Woody Dumart. The Bruins, with a record of 30-11-7, win their division by 7 points over the Rangers and 30 points over third-place Chicago, which will find its redemption in the playoffs. Toronto, with a record of 24-15-9, beats the Americans and Canadians, who tie for second, by 12 points in the Canadian division. The Bruins, with the league's tightest defense, give up just 89 goals in 48 games. Toronto, with a line of Silaps, Busher-Jackson, and Gordie Drillin, boasts the league's most prolific offense, scoring 151 goals. Toronto's sophomore sensation Gordie Drillin leads the league in goals with 26, en route to his first scoring championship, 52 points overall. Silaps, the up-and-coming Toronto superstar, leads the NHL in assists with 29. The Rangers feature a trio of Patricks. Lester is the coach GM, while his sons Lynn and newcomer Muzz are players. Maroons goalie Bill Beveridge loses 30 games, while Boston's Tiny Thompson wins 30 games. A year after winning the Stanley Cup, the Detroit Red Wings fall to 4th in a 4-team division. Chicago's Paul Thompson is 3rd in the league in scoring with 44 points, behind Maple Leafs' Gord Drillin with 52 and Silaps with 50. Maroons winger George Samantha has a career year. He's 2nd in the NHL in goals with 23 and 4th in points with 42. Habs winger Toe Blake combined with Paul Haynes for 30 goals and 68 points. Boston's Tiny Thompson leads the league with a tiny 1.85 goals against average. Toronto's Red Horner, the league's highest-scoring backliner with 24 points, is the most penalized as well with 92 penalty minutes. The Rangers have 4 skaters: Art Coulter with 90, Ott Heller with 68, Joe Cooper with 57, and Bay Pratt with 56, among the top 5 in penalty minutes leaders. Rangers goalie Dave Kerr leads the NHL in shutouts with 8 and finishes 2nd in goals against average with 2.00. Earl Robertson, the Stanley Cup hero of the previous year from Detroit, turns in a 2.31 goals against average for the Americans. He'll mind the net for New York for the duration of the franchise. Sweeney Schreiner, a former scoring champ, scores 21 goals, tied for 4th overall, but falls short of the scoring race. In the opening round of the playoffs, the Hawks beat the Canadians, winning Game 3 3-2 in overtime. The quarterfinal matchup between the Americans and the Rangers also goes to OT of Game 3. The Amerks' Lorne Carr beats Dave Kerr in triple overtime for a 3-2 victory over the New York Rangers. In the semifinals, the Hawks dispatch the Americans in 3 games. Chicago wins the second game 1-0 on a double overtime goal by rookie ace Cully Dahlstrom. The Maple Leafs and Bruins enter thrill-a-minute best-of-5 semifinal series with 2 excellent goalies, Turk Broda and Tiny Thompson, respectively. The Leafs sweep the Bruins in the semis, outscoring Boston by 1 goal in each game. The Leafs win Game 1 on George Parsons' double overtime goal, and they take Game 3 on Gord Drillin's overtime goal. The underdog Blackhawks stunned Toronto in the first game of the finals 3-1. Johnny Gosling scores a pair, and sub-goalie Alfie Moore stars for injured Mike Karakis. Chicago uses another sub-goalie, Paul Goodman, in Game 2 of the finals, but loses 5-1. Mike Karakis returns to the net for Game 3 of the finals. He stops everything but Silap's first period goal as Chicago wins 2-1. The Hawks beat the Leafs in Game 4 of the finals 4-1 as Carl Voss scores the winning goal. The Hawks thus win their second Stanley Cup. Eddie Shore recaptures the Hart Trophy, his fourth. Teammate Tiny Thompson wins the Vezina. Chicago's Cully Dahlstrom skates off with the Calder Trophy. Gordy Drillin, the scoring champ, also wins the Lady Byng Trophy. Not since the Ace Bailey benefit game in 1934 had NHL All-Stars faced each other in competition, but in November 1937, the NHL commissioned an All-Star game between combined Montreal Canadiens, Maroons team, and a group of stars from the remaining teams in an effort to raise money for the Morenz family. The contest, which marked the final on-ice appearance of defenseman King Clancy, went to the NHL All-Stars, who beat the Montrealers 6-5. The 1937-38 Blackhawks were coached by a baseball umpire owned by a man who attempted to compile an All-American roster and led by a player who had never scored over 20 goals in a season. However, Coach Bill Stewart, owner Frederick McLaughlin, and leading scorer Paul Thompson combined to bring the Windy City its second Stanley Cup of the decade as the Hawks shocked Toronto in the finals. When Murray Muzz Patrick arrived in a Rangers uniform in 1937-38, he was united with brother Lynn and father Lester. Muzz played only one game that year, but he drew 2 assists. Lynn made his debut 3 years earlier, and in 1937-38 he had his first big year with 15 goals and 19 assists. Lester Patrick, coach of the Rangers since 1926-27, guided the New Yorkers into the playoffs for the 11th time in 12 years in 1937-38. Toronto's Gordy Drillin, an import from the Maritime provinces, led the league in scoring in 1937-38. The sophomore skater registered 26 goals and 52 points to edge teammate Sil Apps in the scoring parade. Noted for having the most accurate shot in the NHL, Drillin had starred in New Brunswick before making his debut in Maple Leaf Gardens. Drillin made his first appearance with the Maple Leafs blue and white in 1936-37. The 1937-38 season marked the birth of Boston's famed Kraut line. Bobby Bauer, Milt Schmidt, and Woody Dmart were given the moniker in reference to their hometown of Kitchener, a German community in the southern Ontario. In their first year together, the Kitchener Kids combined for 46 goals and 88 points. With 3 youngsters leading the way, the Bruins ascended to the top of the league with a 30-11-7 record. Already recognized as one of the NHL's all-time great netminders, Tiny Thompson captured his 4th career Vezina Trophy in 1937-38, leading the league in wins with 30 goals against average at 1.85. The Leafs bested the venerable Thompson on the night, winning 1-0 on a goal by George Parsons in double overtime. The New York Americans and the New York Rangers faced each other in the playoffs only twice in their histories, the final time coming in the opening round of the 1938 playoffs. Nell Stewart of the Americans celebrates his third-period game-tying goal in decisive Game 3. The Americans won the game and the series on a goal by Lauren Carr at the 42nd mark of the third overtime period. The first NHL player to score 3 sudden death playoff goals in a career was Mel Hill, and he scored them all in one series. Hill, a 25-year-old forward for the Boston Bruins, wielded his legendary magic in the 1939 playoffs. During the season, the Bruins finished first with a record of 36-10-2 in the American Division, a full 16 points ahead of the second-place Rangers. In the playoffs, it was expected that either center Bill Cowley or the Kraut line, Milt Schmidt, Bobby Bauer, and Woody Dmart, would lead the attack. Instead, the 1939 playoffs belonged to the little-known Hill. During the regular season, Hill had been an unobtrusive right wing on the Bruins' third line, scoring only 10 goals. Apparently, he was saving it all up for Boston's semifinal matchup with the Rangers. The best-of-7 series opened at Madison Square Garden, and after 3 normal periods, the teams had battled to a 1-1 tie. No one could muster a goal through the first overtime or the second. By this time, the Rangers' strategy had become apparent to Boston coach Art Ross. New York, it seemed, was determined to stifle Cowley's scoring chances with some blanket checking while keeping a watchful eye on high-scoring left wing Roy Conacher as well. A few seconds before the third overtime, Ross summoned Cowley to his side. "We've got to fool them," he told Cowley. "They're watching Chronicle so carefully it would be better to feed Hill." It took nearly an entire overtime period before Cowley could convert Ross's advice to action. Finally, at about 19:20 of the third overtime, Cowley spotted Hill camped in front of the New York goalie Dave Kerr. Hill shot, and at 1:10 a.m., the Bruins won the game. Game 2 moved to Boston, and after 3 periods, the teams were tied 2-2. At the 8-minute mark of the first overtime, Cowley charged the Rangers' defense and dropped the puck back to Hill, who proved a hero once again. Hill fired it from 40 feet, and the Bruins rejoiced with another sudden victory. The Bruins took their momentum back home, where they cruised to a 4-1 victory in Game 3. The Rangers, however, refused to roll over and startled the Bruins with their 3 straight victories, sending the series to the decisive encounter. Game 7 was yet another heart-thumper as the teams went all the way to the third overtime tied at 1 apiece. 8 minutes into the third OT, Boston's Chronicle received a pass from defenseman Eddie Shore and hammered a drive. Rangers goalie Bert Gardner gloved the puck and flipped it into the corner, expecting his defenseman to retrieve it. Instead, Cowley got there first, spotted Hill, and fed him the puck. Gardner moved to stop Mel's shot, but he was too late. The puck was in, and the Bruins had won the series 4-3. In the Stanley Cup Finals, Boston breezed past Toronto 4-1 as young Mel. He became known forever as Sudden Death Hill. The NHL's penalty shot ruling is changed as shooters are now allowed to skate in on the goalie. The NHL's 2-referee system is abandoned as the league returns to the old 1-referee, 1-linesman system. On June 22, 1938, the Montreal Maroons announced they are withdrawing from the NHL due to financial problems. The NHL outlines per diem expenses for players at $5 per man for food and $2.50 per man for hotels. The 7-team NHL ends the division format and allows 6 teams to qualify for the Stanley Cup playoffs. Ironically, the defending champion Blackhawks are the only team not to make the playoffs. Although they won the Stanley Cup under coach Bill Stewart, the Blackhawks fire Stewart after an 8-10-3 start. The powerful Boston Bruins go 36-10-2 and finish 16 points ahead of the second-place Rangers. The Bruins unveil a new offensive weapon, rookie left winger Roy Conacher, who skates on the top line with Bill Cowley and Mel Hill. Roy Conacher, a strapping 22-year-old, achieves a sensational feat. He leads the NHL in goals with 26 as a rookie. Playmaking wizard Bill Cowley of Boston leads the league in assists with 34 and is third in scoring with 42. The Montreal Canadiens struggle through a 15-24-9 season, but capture the final playoff berth as they finish 7 points ahead of Chicago. Habs left winger Toe Blake wins the scoring title with 47 points. Sweeney Schreiner leads the New York Americans to a 4th-place finish with 44 points, which is 2nd overall. Playing on a line with Neil and Matt Colville, Rangers left winger Alex Shibicki bags 24 goals, tying him for 2nd overall with Toe Blake. The Rangers' top trio of Alex Shibicki and the Colvilles, 49 goals, 98 points overall, is outscored by teammates Phil Watson, Brian Hextall, and Dutch Hiller, 45 goals, 101 points. Frank Brimsek, a 23-year-old Minnesotan, leads the NHL in wins with 33, goals against at 1.58, and shutouts with 10. During one stretch, Frank Brimsek plays 231 minutes and 54 seconds of shutout hockey, breaking the record set by his predecessor Tiny Thompson at 224 minutes and 47 seconds. Brimsek is named Mr. Zero. Tiny Thompson is not out of work long. He's purchased by Detroit after the Bruins cast him aside. Rangers goalie Dave Kerr turns in a 2.19 goals against average in 26 victories. Toronto's burly netminder Turk Broda records 8 shutouts, second to only Frank Brimsek. Montreal's slick Paul Hayes is 2nd in the league in assists with 33. Toronto's Red Horner, the reigning bad boy of the NHL, wins his 7th straight penalty crown with 85 penalty minutes, though he has new competition from Ranger Muzz Patrick with 72 penalty minutes. Future Hall of Famer Bobby Hull is born January 3rd, 1939, Point Anne, Ontario. The playoff system is reformed. The Bruins, number 1, the Rangers, number 2, earn first-round byes. Toronto, number 3, plays the Americans, number 4, and the Wings, number 5, play Montreal, number 6. Toronto sweeps the Americans 4-0 and 2-0 in their best-of-3 series. Detroit outlasts Montreal in their quarterfinal series thanks to a 1-0 overtime victory in Game 3 on Marty Barry's goal. Toronto and Detroit play a best-of-3 semifinal series. Toronto wins Game 3 on a Gordie Drillins winner in overtime. The The Bruins and the Rangers play the first 7-game playoff series since 1918-1919. 4 games go to overtime. Boston beats the Rangers 2-1 in Game 1 as Mel Hill scores with 35 seconds left in triple overtime. The Bruins win Game 2 3-2 when Hill again scores at 8:24 of the first OT. Boston takes Game 3 before the Rangers stave off elimination with 3 straight wins. Game 5 is tied at 1-1 until 17-19 of OT when Rangers rookie Clint Smith wins it. The Bruins eliminate the Rangers in Game 7 as Mel Hill scores in the third overtime to snap a 1-1 tie. The Stanley Cup Finals are anticlimactic as Boston rolls to a 4-1 victory over Toronto. The Bruins win by scores of 2-1, 3-2, 3-1, 2-0, and 3-1. Bruins goalie Frank Brimsek, brilliant in the semis, is unbeatable in the finals, allowing just 6 goals. Frank Brimsek becomes the first person to win both the Vezina Trophy and the Calder Trophy. The Rangers' Clint Smith skates off with the Lady Byng Trophy. Montreal's Toe Blake, the scoring champ, captures the Hart Trophy. One of the greatest goaltenders in NHL history made his first appearance between the pipes in 1938-39. Frank Mr. Zero Brimsek led all netminders with 33 wins, 10 shutouts, and a stingy 1.58 goals against average. He was even more spectacular in the playoffs, where he won 8 games, leading the Bruins to their second Stanley Cup title. Brimsek earned his nickname by posting 6 shutouts in Boston's first 12 games of the season. Hector Toe Blake was one of the lone bright lights for the 15-24-9 Canadiens during the 1938-39 season. In only his third full season in the league, Blake led all NHL sharpshooters with 47 points and also captured the Hart Trophy, a rarity for a young player on a bad team. Blake, who started his NHL career with the Montreal Maroons, was acquired by the Habs in 1935-36 and quickly became one of the team's best young stars. Rarely is a coach fired just months after winning the Stanley Cup, but such was the case for Chicago Blackhawks coach Bill Stewart, who was given the Ziggy after the starting 1938-39 season 8-10-3. At least he had a second job to fall back on. Stewart, a baseball umpire during the summer, is seen donning the tools of the trade prior to an exhibition game between the Red Sox and the Braves. When Boston superstar Eddie Shore threatened to sit out the 38-39 season because of a contract dispute with the Bruins front office, NHL chief Frank Calder intervened and convinced the 4-time Hart Trophy winner to sign on the dotted line for $7,000. The perennial leader of the penalty race, Red Horner, spent only 85 minutes in purgatory in 1938-39, though he had come a long way down since he registered his career-high 167 minutes back in 1935-36. He was still able to lead the Sinners to the furnace this season. Boston's Roy Chronicle was the NHL's sharpest rookie shooter in 1938-39, becoming the first freshman ever to lead the league in goals after piling 26 pucks past enemy goalies during the 48-game campaign. Chronicle continued to produce for the Bruins in the playoffs, collecting 6 goals. Included was the Stanley Cup winner in Game 5 of the finals against Toronto as the Bruins won their second championship. The first ever 7-game NHL playoff series between the Bruins and the Rangers in 1939 was actually more like 9 games, as the teams played 133 minutes of overtime, the equivalent of 2.2 games. It's not surprising the Rangers scored only 12 goals during the affair, considering they had to penetrate a wall of defenseman Eddie Shore and goalie Frank Brimsek. The New York Rangers, who had not won the Stanley Cup since 1933, underwent a startling front office change before the 1939-40 season. Lester Patrick, who had coached the club since its inception in 1926, turned the reins over to his former star center Frank Boucher. Skeptics doubted that the mild-mannered Boucher could whip the Blue Shirts into winners, but Frank had plenty of raw material with which to work, especially forwards Phil Watson, Brian Hextall, and Neil Colville. The Rangers were also strong in goal with Dave Kerr, who had claimed the 1939-40 Vezina Trophy. New York finished the regular season at 27-11-10, 3 points behind first-place Boston, but the tie turned quickly in the playoffs as the New Yorkers beat the Bostonians 4-2 behind Kerr's stellar goaltending. Kerr shut out the high-scoring Bruins 3 times despite a Boston team that had featured such stars as Milt Schmidt, Bobby Bauer, Woody DeMart, and goalie Frank Brimsek. "It's the second best team I had ever seen," said Boucher. "The best was the Bruins team that had won the Stanley Cup the year before." That series win sent New York to the Stanley Cup Finals against Toronto. Because the Ringling Brothers circus had already been booked into Madison Square Garden, the Rangers could play only the first 2 games of the finals at home. All the remaining games would be slated for Maple Leaf Gardens. Facing this schedule imbalance, the Rangers knew they had to win both games at New York. Undaunted, Boucher's Blue Shirts opened with a 2-1 win at home on Alf Pike's sudden death goal. They also won Game 2 6-2 thanks to Brian Hextall's hat-trick. The move to Maple Leaf Gardens helped Toronto gain a 2-1 win in Game 3 and a 3-0 victory in Game 4. Neither team seemed destined to win Game 5 as it rolled into one overtime and then another. Finally, at 11:43 of the second sudden death session, low-scoring Rangers defenseman Muzz Patrick took a pass from Neil Colville and beat goalie Turk Broda. New York was now just a win from the Stanley Cup. Game 6 appeared to be all Toronto's as the Leafs built a 2-0 lead after 2 periods. It was then that manager Patrick entered the dressing room. "Well, boys," he said, "you've had your fun. Now let's go down, get to business. I've made arrangements for a victory party in the Tudor Room of the Royal York Hotel. I'll see you there. Don't let me down." The Rangers responded in the third period as Colville and Pike rifled home goals 2 minutes apart. The game entered sudden death overtime, but was over soon. The overtime was only 2 minutes old when the line of Hextall, Watson, and Dutch Hiller charged into the enemy zone. Hiller got the puck to Watson, who shoveled a pass to Hextall at 2:07. Hextall blasted the rubber past goalie Broda. Despite playing the last 4 games on the road, the Rangers were Stanley Cup champions. The NHL adopts a rule concerning a substitute who replaces a goalie who's serving a penalty. The sub may not don any goaltending equipment other than a goalie stick and gloves. The league's third All-Star game is staged on October 29, 1939 to raise funds for the family of Canadiens hero and coach Babe Siebert, who drowned in the off-season. The war in Europe begins. It will soon take its toll on the NHL as players will enlist for military duty. Cooney Weiland, 35, replaces Art Ross as coach of the Boston Bruins. The Rangers hire former star Frank Boucher as coach in what will be deemed a brilliant move. In a blockbuster deal, the Leafs acquire Sweeney Schreiner from the Amerks for Busher Jackson, Murray Armstrong, ex-Blackhawk Doc Romneys, and Buzz Bowl. The Bruins have the best line in hockey as the Kraut line combines for 61 goals and 138 points. The Kraut line, Woody Dumart, Milt Schmidt, and Bobby Bauer, features the NHL's newest scoring champion as Schmidt finishes with 52 points. Because of the conflict in Europe, the Kraut line is renamed the Kitchener Kids. The Bruins boast the NHL's top 4 scorers: Milt Schmidt, 52 points, Bobby Bauer, 43, Woody Dumart, 43, and Bill Cowley, 40. Milt Schmidt leads the league in assists with 30 and ties Woody Dumart for second in goals with 22. Rangers right winger Brian Hextall captures the goal-scoring title with 24. Brian Hextall center Phil Watson is second in the NHL in assists with 28. Toronto's Gord Drillin ties Boston's Bill Cowley for fourth in points with 40. Herb Kane, the flashy Bruins winger, ties Toronto's Gord Drillin for fourth overall in goals with 21. Rangers goalie Dave Kerr wins the goals against race with a 1.60 mark as the New York squad surrenders the fewest goals in the league at 77. The Bruins win the regular season title with a powerful offense, 170 total goals and 31 total victories. Boston sophomore Frank Brimsek goes 31, 12, and 5 with 6 shutouts. Chicago gives last year's playoff stand-in Paul Goodman a shot, and he goes 16, 10, and 5 with a 2.00 goals against average. Toe Blake leads the last-place Canadiens in scoring, 17 goals and 19 assists for 36 points. After 14 seasons in Boston, Eddie Shore is sold to the Americans. Eddie Shore retires and becomes owner-coach of the American Hockey League's Springfield Indians. Detroit's brilliant Eddie Goodfellow leads all backliners in goals with 11. 4 NHL backliners, Dick Clapper and Bill Hollett from Boston, Ebby Goodfellow from Detroit, and Charlie Conacher from the Americans score 28 points each. Red Hornet, Toronto's nasty defenseman, leads the league in penalty minutes with 87 for the 8th and final time. Toronto's third-place finish rests on the shoulders of goalie Turk Broda, who posts a 2.30 goals against average and records 4 shutouts. The Red Wings suffer their third losing record in a row, finishing 16, 26, and 6 for 5th place. Red Dutton's New York Americans outdistance the Canadiens by 9 points for the last playoff spot. The Maple Leafs, number 3, quickly dispatched the Blackhawks, number 4, in the quarterfinals, beating them 3-2 in overtime and 2-1. The Red Wings oust the Amerks in a tightly fought best-of-3 series, winning Game 1 in OT and taking the decisive third game 3-1. Toronto sweeps Detroit in the semifinals as Turk Broda beats the Wings 2-1 and 3-1. The first-place Bruins and second-place Rangers meet in a best-of-7 rematch of their 1939 playoff war. After trailing Boston 2-1, the Rangers reel off 3 straight wins to advance to the finals. Rangers goalie Dave Kerr pitches shutouts in Games 1, 4, and 5. The Rangers take Game 1 of the finals 2-1 as Alfie Pike scores 15-30 into overtime. After absorbing a 6-2 beating in the Game 2, the Leafs rebound and tie the finals with a 2-1 and 3-0 wins over New York. The Rangers win Game 5 of the finals 2-1, and Muzz Patrick scores in the second overtime. On April 13, 1940, the Rangers win their third Stanley Cup as Brian Hextall breaks a 2-2 tie at 2:04 of overtime. Detroit defenseman Ebby Goodfellow wins the Hart Trophy while Boston's Bobby Bauer captures the Lady Byng. Rangers' Dave Kerr claims the Vezina Trophy while rookie teammate Kilby McDonald cops the Calder. Boston may have had 4 of the top 5 scorers in the NHL in 1939-40, but the Rangers' Brian Hextall led everybody with 24 goals. Hextall fired in 4 more during the playoffs, including 3 goals in Game 2 of the finals. He also knocked in the Cup winner in Game 6. With the finale tied 2-2 in overtime, Hextall beat Toronto goalie Turk Broda at the 2:07 mark to give the Rangers the coveted Silver Bowl. The NHL's assist leader in 1938-39, Bill Cowley, finished tied for 4th in the league in points in 1939-40 with 13 goals and 27 assists. If it weren't for Boston's high-scoring first-string line of Schmidt, Dumart, and Bauer, Cowley would have tied for the league scoring title with Gord Drillin. Cowley, who led all postseason scorers with 14 points in 1939, managed only 1 point in 6 playoff games in 1940. In 1939-40, veteran Turk Broda suffered his first slump, causing Conn Smythe to call on rookie Phil Stein to fill the gap. In his first outing, Stein fought Detroit to a 2-2 tie and won a spot in the lineup card while Broda regrouped on the bench. In the pregame warm-up before the next start, Stein took a shot off the forehead, forcing Broda to stand in for his stand-in. Turk regained his form, and Stein never played in the NHL again. The Oshawa Generals become the first team to win consecutive Memorial Cup titles, going all the way in both 38-39 and 39-40. NHL fans endured another tragedy when Canadiens veteran Babe Siebert drowned prior to the 1939-40 season. Siebert had recently been named coach of the Montreal team. The NHL staged a benefit all-star game to raise funds for Siebert's family. The guns that signaled the start of World War II went off in September of 1939 when Nazi hordes invaded Poland. Within days, the British Commonwealth began mobilization. From those dark days until the summer of 1945, the perils of war consumed the thoughts of all of the world's people. The sport of hockey became insignificant. NHL players didn't become directly involved in the war effort until 1940. Hitler was preparing for an invasion of England, and England's Royal Air Force needed help. At that point, Canada was called upon to supply able-bodied men. NHL President Frank Calder knew that if the war extended beyond 1941, it could have dire effects on professional hockey. Already, there was talk that the league might have to suspend operations if parliamentarians in Ottawa decided that hockey was impeding the war effort. However, the NHL owners were given a mandate to continue operations from both the Canadian and American governments as long as they were able to ice enough teams somehow, recalled Bruins manager Art Ross. We were able to find enough players, but it wasn't easy. The Bruins would lose their entire Kraut line to the Royal Canadian Air Force, but not until after the 1941-42 season. Each of the triumvirate remained in 1940-41, with the only change being the line's name. Kraut line was too politically sensitive, so Milt Schmidt, Bobby Bauer, and Woody Dumart instead became the Kitchener Kids, since they were all from Kitchener, Ontario. Because the United States was not yet directly involved in the war, a state of normalcy prevailed among 4 of the 5 American teams: Detroit, Chicago, Boston, and the Rangers. Only one, the New York Americans, experienced problems. The Amerks, managed by former defenseman Mervyn Red Dutton, were hurting both artistically and financially, despite talented young defenseman Pat Boxcar Egan, up-and-coming goalie Chuck Bonnie Prince Charlie Rayner, and New York finished the season in the cellar with a record of 8-29-11. Boston was the class of the league, with the kids from Kitchener, as well as the NHL scoring champ Bill Cowley and star goalie Frank Brimsek. The Bruins went 27-8-13, which included a 23-game undefeated streak. Boston needed 7 games to get past Toronto in the semis, but then they broomed Detroit in 4 games in the finals. There was little jubilation, however, since the dark days of the war loomed ahead. That spring, Japan was expanding its territorial claims in the Pacific, and Germany was primed for an invasion of the Soviet Union. As the teams dispersed at season's end, players wondered whether they'd see each other before the end of the war. Muzz Patrick of the Rangers already made it clear that he was enlisting, as had Kilby McDonald. One thing was for sure: the National Hockey League was ready for war.
I'm Charlie Saunier from the Renegades of Puck, and this has been the 20th Century Hockey Chronicle. If you'd like to support more projects like this, please follow the Renegades of Puck on all social media platforms and also visit renegadesofpuck.com.